I remember the first time I got a glimpse of that place, a void darker than any night I'd known, its pull so fierce you could feel it gnawing at your bones, even from light years away. It was supposed to be routine, at least as routine as anything can be when you're being sent to explore the outer edges of known space. We were told the mission was about understanding gravitational anomalies, but we all knew what that meant. This was no simple reconnaissance. We were getting closer to a black hole, a point from which nothing should return. The ship hummed with a low, steady rhythm as we moved deeper into space, the crew unusually silent. There were 5 of us, each picked for our expertise, each of us as seasoned as space explorers come. But as we drifted closer to our destination, even the bravest among us seemed to feel something pressing down. The lights on the control panels flickered once or twice, and every now and then the ship seemed to shudder, as though resisting the inevitable. I ignored it. At least, I tried to. I told myself it was just the usual minor glitches. We eventually reached a region where the stars seemed to thin out, leaving only that vast, gaping maw ahead. The black hole was right there, absorbing all light, all noise, all reason. It was just wrong. No simulation, no training, nothing prepared us for how disturbing it would feel just to be in its presence. I found myself gripping the armrest, my knuckles pale against the dark interior. And then there was the sound. A faint, hollow whirring, barely noticeable but always there, like a whisper you can't quite make out. We powered down the ship for some diagnostics. As the hum of the engines faded, the silence was so thick you could feel it press against your eardrums. That's when it happened. A subtle flicker on the monitor, just for a split second, a face. My face, staring back at me from the control screen. I blinked, shaking it off as exhaustion. But then it happened again. My own eyes, hollow and expressionless, looking straight at me. I could have sworn I saw a hand reaching out, as though trying to push through from the other side. When I blinked, it was gone, and I couldn't be sure if it had ever been there at all. I laughed it off with the crew, but I could tell from their faces that they weren't entirely convinced. We all tried to laugh it off. Hours later, we initiated a routine scan of the black hole's event horizon. Nothing major, just measurements to gauge the gravitational field. But the readings were strange, inconsistent, and didn't match any known pattern. The scanner returned impossible results, coordinates that didn't make sense, showing fragments of images that seemed familiar. There were flashes of us, our faces, our hands gripping the controls, distorted like they'd been caught mid-scream. And then, for a heartbeat, we saw the ship. Our ship. There it was on the monitor, drifting slowly, like a ghost version of itself, pieces of it broken and floating in the darkness. We tried to adjust the equipment, thinking it was some sort of feedback error. One of the engineers muttered something about echoes, an after-image of sorts, something lingering from the gravitational distortions around the black hole. But I didn't buy it. Those weren't just random distortions. The way the image shifted, the way the lights on that broken ship flickered, it felt too real, too specific, like a warning. As the hours dragged on, the atmosphere grew heavier, almost suffocating. Conversations dropped to low whispers, and even the hum of the ship seemed subdued, as if it too was waiting. And then I saw it again. A figure in the corridor this time, flickering in the dim light. It looked just like me. I held my breath, watching as it stood still, staring at me with hollow eyes. I wanted to turn, to walk away, but something kept me rooted there. Frozen, it raised a hand, pressing its palm against the wall, leaving behind a faint shadow of itself, and then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. Each of us started to see things. Small flashes in the corner of our eyes, shadows where there shouldn't be any. It wasn't just my face anymore. The others were seeing versions of themselves, too. The navigator swore he saw himself standing at the helm, eyes vacant and mouth twisted in a silent scream. One of the engineers claimed she heard whispers, faint and pleading, echoing down the corridors, all in her own voice. As the days wore on, the apparitions became bolder, more persistent. I'd wake up and find myself staring into my own face, hollow and twisted, mouthing words I couldn't understand. Each version of us seemed trapped, like they were trying to tell us something, trying to warn us, maybe. But every time we got close to understanding, they'd vanish, leaving only the echo of their presence, and all the while the black hole loomed closer, pulling us into its silent, unending depths. The strangest thing, though, was that none of us felt the urge to leave. We all spoke about turning back, about abandoning the mission, but something held us there. It was as if the black hole itself was drawing us in, warping our minds, dulling our instincts. And as we drifted deeper into its pull, our doubles grew more insistent, appearing not just as fleeting glimpses, but as solid, almost tangible figures, shadows of ourselves from another place, another time. One night, as I sat alone in the control room, staring into the emptiness, I felt a presence beside me. I didn't look. I didn't have to. I knew it was me. Another me. A version that had perhaps been lost to this black hole's pull long ago. It leaned close, and in a voice barely louder than a whisper, it said, "You don't belong here. None of us do." The words settled over me like a heavy fog, chilling in their simplicity. And then it was gone, leaving me alone in the silence, with nothing but the endless dark stretching before us. Days turned into nights, or at least they would have if time still felt like it held any meaning. Hours blended together as our sense of self unraveled, each of us haunted by our own specters. We were no longer explorers, but echoes, fading shadows of ourselves. The black hole was no longer just a destination. It was a mirror, a trap, an endless reflection of every version of ourselves that had ever set foot on this journey, lost and wandering in its gravitational grip. By the time we realized it, escape felt like an illusion, something we'd clung to as the last remnants of our humanity. We had seen ourselves as we might become, lost, fragmented, a chorus of ghosts bound to the edges of reality. And as I looked out into the darkness, I knew, with a certainty that settled in my bones, that we were not the first, and we would not be the last. The days stretched, or maybe it was just hours, or minutes. Out here, time felt like it was slipping through our fingers, disintegrating like dust in a vacuum. Each of us was on edge, knowing that we were trapped in a place where reality seemed to bend and warp, but unable to turn back. Every attempt to calculate a route away from the black hole came back scrambled, coordinates twisted, distances flickering between impossible numbers. It was as if space itself had turned on us, refusing to release us from its grasp. We were prisoners, caught in the orbit of something vast, indifferent, and hungry. One of the crew, Daniels, had taken to muttering to himself, tracing lines on the wall as if mapping out something only he could see. He'd been a rock at the start of the mission, always sure of himself, confident even in the darkest corners of space. But now he looked haggard, his eyes sunken, haunted. "They're trying to find a way out," he whispered to me one night, his voice barely a rasp. "But every way they try, it leads them back here." I asked him who he was talking about, but he just shook his head, pressing his fingers to his temples. "You wouldn't understand," he muttered, "because you haven't seen it yet, haven't seen yourself yet." He wouldn't say anything more after that, just turned and walked back down the corridor, his shadow flickering against the wall, stretching and distorting as though it had a mind of its own. The next day, or what we thought was the next day, We all started seeing changes on the ship. Tiny, almost imperceptible at first. A misplaced tool, an open panel that no one recalled touching. But then, as the hours went on, things grew stranger. I walked into the control room only to find the entire setup inverted, as if I'd stepped into a mirror image of our ship. The lights were dimmer, the air thicker, and there was an oppressive silence that hung over everything, like we'd crossed into a shadowed version of our reality. I backed out of the room trying to shake off the feeling, but it only got worse. Every corner I turned, it felt like there was someone, something, just out of sight watching. I caught glimpses of movement, a flash of someone darting out of view, only to find the corridor empty when I checked. The whispers, faint and distorted, grew louder, their words twisting in my mind, hinting at something I couldn't quite grasp. Then one night, or what passed for night here, one of the engineers came to me, wide-eyed and pale, barely able to get the words out. "Captain, there's someone in my quarters, and it's me." I followed him back, half convinced he'd just imagined it. But when we got there, I saw it too. His double, sitting on the edge of his bed, head bowed, hands trembling. It looked up at us slowly, eyes hollow, and smiled. A twisted, lifeless version of a smile that seemed to cut right through me. We stood frozen as the double murmured in a voice that was eerily familiar, yet wrong. "It doesn't end. You'll come back, every time." It faded, leaving us alone in the room, a faint chill lingering in the air. The engineer was shaking, barely able to stand, and I couldn't blame him. Seeing yourself, that close, that broken, it does something to you, something that no amount of training can prepare you for. After that, the ship became a maze of familiar yet distorted scenes. Rooms would appear where they shouldn't be. Corridors that should have ended turned into endless loops. The ship felt alive, reshaping itself, trapping us in a twisted reflection of our own design. I found myself avoiding mirrors, screens, anything that could hold a reflection, and the others did the same, eyes averted, fearful of what might stare back. One day I was heading to the engine room when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting to see one of the crew, but instead I found myself face to face with me. This version of myself looked gaunt, shadows under its eyes, clothes frayed and stained. It reached out a hand, and instinctively I recoiled, stepping back. Its voice was a low, hoarse whisper, like it had been screaming for eons. "You won't make it. None of us do." I didn't say anything, just watched as it faded, leaving nothing but an echo of that final sentence lingering in the cold, empty corridor. But from then on, I knew we were dealing with something beyond anything we could explain. Something that had turned the black hole into a mirror of sorts, reflecting versions of ourselves that had been trapped, lost in its gravitational hold. Versions of ourselves that had tried to escape, only to be pulled back over and over in an endless loop. Time continued to slip, and soon even our memories began to blur. I found myself questioning how long we'd been here, wondering if we'd even left Earth at all. The others were no different, faces haunted, eyes vacant, like we'd been hollowed out. We were still here, still breathing, but our sense of self, our memories, it was all fading, slowly and inexorably, as if the black hole itself was erasing us bit by bit, stripping away everything that made us who we were. One by one, the others started to disappear. Daniel's was the first. One moment he was there, staring blankly at a reflection of himself in a cracked screen, and the next he was gone. The only trace of him left was a faint outline on the seat where he'd been sitting, as if he'd been erased, pulled into some unseen dimension. We searched for him, called out into the darkness, but there was no answer. Just silence, pressing down on us, wrapping us tighter in its suffocating grip. In the days that followed, more of the crew vanished, each one leaving behind only a faint shadow, a ghostly imprint on the walls, like they'd been consumed by the ship itself. And the versions of ourselves grew bolder, appearing in pairs, then groups, until the ship was filled with shadows, flickering images of ourselves, each one more twisted and broken than the last. I was the last one left, wandering through the empty halls, listening to the echoes of my own footsteps, haunted by the faces of my crew, trapped in an endless loop of despair and isolation. The black hole loomed outside, its pull stronger than ever, a relentless force dragging me closer with every passing moment. In the final moments, I felt myself fading, the edges of my vision blurring, my mind slipping into the void. I looked down and saw my own hands, transparent, fading into nothing. And just before the darkness consumed me, I heard a whisper, faint and chilling, echoing through the silence. It was my own voice, trapped, pleading. "You won't make it, none of us do." And then there was nothing but darkness. The silence was endless, a void so complete it seemed to press against my skull, filling every inch of my mind with a deafening hum. I don't know how long I drifted in that emptiness, trapped between sleep and awareness, a flicker of thought in an ocean of nothing. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to feel the ship around me again. But something was wrong. The air was thick, stale, like it had been sealed away for centuries, untouched and unbreathable. I opened my eyes, expecting darkness, but there was a faint glow, dim and sickly, illuminating the control room in a dull haze. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. The seats where my crew once sat were empty, but each chair held a faint impression, like a shadow burned into the fabric, remnants of the people who had once occupied them. I reached out to touch one, my fingers hovering just above the worn, hollowed-out seat, and felt a shiver crawl up my spine. It was like reaching through a ghost. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere deeper in the ship. It was soft, almost hesitant, as if someone, or something, was trying to make contact without drawing attention. My heart pounded, the sound blending with the tapping until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I took a step forward, the floor creaking underfoot, the sound echoing in the oppressive quiet. I felt like I was intruding, as though I'd wandered into someone else's memory. An abandoned place, not meant for the living. The corridors were twisted, familiar yet wrong. Every angle slightly skewed, every shadow elongated. I knew the layout of this ship like the back of my hand, but now it felt like it was alive, shifting, as if it was hiding secrets behind each turn. I followed the tapping, a faint but insistent sound that seemed to lead me deeper into the heart of the vessel. And then, as I turned a corner, I saw them, my crew, or rather, what was left of them. Figures stood along the walls, lined up like statues, their faces pale and expressionless, eyes empty. They were frozen in place, hands outstretched, reaching towards something I couldn't see, each one caught in a silent scream. I wanted to turn away, to run, but something kept me there, my feet rooted to the spot. I looked closer, and that's when I realized I wasn't just looking at my crew. I was looking at myself. Each figure was a version of me, twisted and faded, staring blankly, a hollow replica caught in endless repetition. I saw versions of myself aged beyond recognition, others as young as I'd been when I first set foot on this ship. Some had injuries, cuts, bruises, burns, while others looked untouched, as though they'd been caught in perfect preservation. Each one seemed frozen in time, a tableau of every possible version of me that had ever entered the black hole's orbit. My breathing grew shallow as I moved among them, my fingers brushing the air just above their outstretched hands. It was surreal, each of them so close, yet so impossibly far. I felt their presence, a dull ache in the pit of my stomach, a faint pull as if each of them was trying to drag me into their own reality, their own version of this ship. And then, as I turned to leave, I saw the first one move. It was subtle, a slight tilt of the head, a twitch of the fingers, but it was enough. One by one, the figures began to shift, their heads turning to face me, their hollow eyes tracking my every move. They didn't speak, didn't make a sound, but their stares were filled with a weight, an understanding that was too heavy to bear. I felt them pressing into my mind, fragments of memories that weren't mine, clawing their way into my thoughts. I saw glimpses of other journeys, other missions that had all ended here, each one a loop, a cycle that had never been broken. I stumbled back, my vision blurring, and the corridor stretched before me, an endless tunnel lined with those haunting replicas, all reaching out, their silent screams frozen in time. I turned, desperate to escape, but everywhere I went I found more of them, more versions of myself, more lives caught in this web, each one a part of this impossible, endless journey. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, a loop that had been replayed 1,000 times before. Each version of me doomed to repeat the same steps, to make the same mistakes. The tapping grew louder, a pounding rhythm that echoed in my skull, driving me forward, pushing me deeper into the maze of shadows. I ran, heart racing, breath shallow. But the ship was unending, corridors looping back on themselves, leading me in circles, each turn bringing me face to face with another version of myself, another ghost trapped in this hell. Finally, I stopped, chest heaving, and let the silence settle over me. The figures had vanished, fading into the walls, leaving only their shadows behind. I stood alone, staring into the endless corridor, feeling the weight of every version of myself pressing down, a chorus of whispers filling my mind. Each one spoke in fragments, snatches of memories that overlapped, blending together in a cacophony of voices, each one pleading, warning, desperate to be heard. I sank to the floor, my head in my hands, as the whispers grew louder, forming a single clear voice, my own but aged, worn, hollow. "You can't escape," it said, the words reverberating through me. "We've all tried. We all come back. There's no way out. Only versions of yourself, endlessly looping, caught in the gravity of the black hole. You'll see yourself over and over, each one a reminder of every path you took, every decision you made, and each version will warn you, try to reach you. But it's all in vain." I looked up, and there I was, standing over me, another me, eyes empty, face pale, lips moving as it repeated the same words over and over. "There's no escape! No way out!" And as it spoke, more figures appeared, lining the corridor, each one an echo of myself, an endless parade of every version that had ever existed in this place. I felt myself fading, my vision blurring, and realized I was becoming one of them. A hollow replica, another shadow to haunt the ship, trapped in the black hole's orbit for eternity. I reached out, trying to hold on to something real, something that felt like me. But my fingers passed through the air, transparent, insubstantial. I was slipping away, merging with the shadows, my thoughts dissolving into the whispers that filled the corridor. And as the last of me faded, I saw them. The next crew, a new ship drifting into the black hole's pull, their faces filled with hope, unaware of the nightmare that awaited them. I tried to reach out, to warn them, but my voice was lost in the void, swallowed by the silence. All I could do was watch, another shadow among countless others, as the loop began again. Another crew caught in the black hole's endless, merciless grip, each one destined to become another version of me, trapped in an unending cycle of fear, despair, and hopelessness, forever reaching for an escape that would never come. I don't know how long I've been here now, or even if time still exists in this place. The moments blur into each other, stretching out like a dark thread, unraveling until nothing remains but the echo of my footsteps. But even in this endless void, I can still remember the ship, the sharp metallic scent of the air, the steady hum of engines, the cold weight of the walls pressing in on me. It feels like a lifetime ago, yet it's as close as a heartbeat. I thought I had lost myself, faded into the ether with the others. But I've come to realize something. Something that's kept me from completely disappearing. This place, it's not just a black hole. It's a mirror, a reflection of every version of myself, every choice I made, every version of me that could have been. The ship, the crew, the endless loops, it's all a prison of my own making, each echo a fragment of a life that could never be, trapped in this infinite, inescapable darkness. I've wandered through these halls for what feels like eternity, retracing steps I can't remember taking, stumbling upon rooms I don't recall entering. The corridors twist and fold in on themselves, defying all logic, every effort to make sense of them. It's like the ship itself is alive, aware of me, shaping itself around my thoughts, pulling me deeper into its endless maze. Sometimes I'll hear voices, faint and distant, calling my name, but when I turn the corner, there's nothing there, nothing but the same shadows, the same empty walls, the same still silence. But there's something else, something I didn't realize until recently. Every now and then, I'll catch a glimpse of myself in the corner of my eye. Another me, standing in the shadows, watching, waiting. I've learned to ignore it, to keep moving, because the more I focus on it, the more it pulls me in, the more the line between who I am and who I could have been begins to blur. Sometimes I'll reach out, my hand trembling as I try to touch one of them, one of these versions of me that's so close yet so far, and every time they vanish, as if they were never really there, leaving nothing but the lingering sense that something, someone, is waiting for me just out of reach. I don't think they're trying to help. I think they're trying to tell me something. Every version of myself that I encounter, every shadow of a life that could have been, it's like they're all trying to scream the same thing at me, to warn me, to reach me. But their words get lost in the static, swallowed by the darkness. And sometimes, when I'm alone, completely alone, I'll hear it, a voice, clear and sharp, cutting through the silence. It's my voice. Or at least it sounds like mine. It's soft at first, almost a whisper, like the wind rustling through a dead tree. You can't escape, it says, and every time my heart skips. You never left. You never will. I used to think the black hole was the source of all this. Its gravity, its pull warping everything around it, trapping me in its infinite grasp. But now I know better. The black hole isn't the cause, it's the result. It's the place where every version of me, every iteration of myself that failed, every me that fell victim to this loop, they all come together, trapped in the same endless cycle. It's like the whole itself is feeding off us, consuming each fragment, each broken piece of who we were, who we could have been, until we're nothing more than echoes. The ship itself is part of it. It's as much a part of me as the shadows, the whispers, the broken echoes of my crew. I've realized this too late, but I think the others, the crew, must have known long before I did. They saw the way the ship shifted, the way it twisted into new shapes, into new versions of itself. It's not just gravity pulling us in. It's something worse. Something that can manipulate our minds, our memories, our very souls, until we're lost in the void. I'm starting to forget what it was like before this, before the mission, before the black hole. I don't remember the faces of the crew anymore, just their shadows, their hollow eyes, their silent screams that echo in my mind when I'm alone. I'm starting to forget who I was, who I am, what I'm even doing here. But there's a part of me, buried deep down, that still knows. I remember the terror, the desperation when we first entered this place, the feeling of something watching us, pulling us closer. I remember how we tried to leave, to fight back, but it was too late. The others, they never had a chance. None of us did. But even as I slip further into this place, even as I feel myself becoming another version of the lost crew, another broken echo, I can't help but wonder if there's a way out. A way to break this cycle, to escape the endless loop. But no matter how many times I search, how many corners I turn, I can never find it. Every door is locked. Every path leads me back here to the beginning, to the ship, to the endless pull of the black hole. I've seen it happen before, time and time again. Another version of myself, one that's been here longer than I have, appears before me, eyes wide with understanding. They try to speak, but no words come out. Instead, they gesture, pointing to something I can't see. Maybe it's the way out. Maybe it's just another trap, another illusion designed to keep me in line. I can't tell anymore. All I know is that I'm running out of time. The walls are closing in. The whispers are growing louder, the shadows more solid, more real. I try to hold on to who I am, but the longer I stay here, the more it slips away. I can feel myself becoming part of the ship, becoming part of this void, this reflection of every failed version of me that's ever existed. It's hard to tell what's real anymore. It's hard to tell if I'm even alive anymore. And just when I think I can't take it anymore, when I think the darkness will finally swallow me whole, I hear it again. The tapping. Soft, faint, but there. Always there. And I know what it is. It's the sound of my own footsteps, echoing back at me from some other version of myself, from some other part of this endless, suffocating loop. I don't know what's left for me anymore, but I know one thing for sure. I'll never escape. Not really. Not while the black hole is here. Not while it's still pulling. Not while I'm still here, still caught in its infinite grasp, with no way out, no way to break free. And when the next crew arrives, when they come to the edge of this place, they'll find me here, waiting. Another shadow among countless others, another version of myself, caught in this nightmare. Another version doomed to repeat the same steps, to make the same mistakes. And they'll hear the tapping too. And they'll wonder, just like I did, what it means. And they'll never know that the tapping is their own footsteps, echoing from a place where time has stopped, where reality has been twisted beyond recognition, where every version of themselves is waiting, just out of reach, forever. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. Because when I open my eyes again, everything has changed. The control room is silent. The lights dim, casting shadows that stretch across the floor like they're reaching for something just out of reach. For a moment, I think I'm alone. But then I see them, reflections in the glass, standing behind me, faint, translucent versions of myself, frozen in expressions of despair, fear, and something worse. Resignation. I sit there, staring at them, unable to turn away, feeling the weight of their presence pressing down on me, They're so close, so real that I half expect one of them to reach out, to grab me, to pull me into whatever nightmare they're trapped in. And then, one by one, they fade, disappearing into the darkness, leaving only their hollow eyes burned into my memory. I know deep down that they were real, that they're versions of myself lost to this place, ghosts lingering in the edges of my mind. As the last of them fades, I feel a strange sense of calm settle over me, a numb acceptance that I'm no longer fighting. I can't leave. I know that now. Every attempt to escape, every step toward freedom has only brought me back to the same place, to the same endless loop. I'm a part of this ship, a part of this black hole, woven into its fabric, bound to it like a thread in an infinite web. And then I hear it, a soft rhythmic hum, barely audible, like a heartbeat echoing through the walls. It's familiar, comforting even, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I think I can remember what it felt like to be human, to have a life outside of this place. The hum grows louder, filling the room, vibrating through the floor, and I realize that it's the sound of the ship, the faint thrum of its engines, a constant reminder of the journey that brought me here. But there's something else beneath it, something darker, deeper, an undercurrent that pulses in time with the black hole's gravity, pulling me closer, drawing me deeper into its grip. I can feel it now, in my bones, in my blood, a relentless force that tugs at every fiber of my being, pulling me toward the edge of something vast and unknowable. It's like the ship itself is alive, a living entity bound to the black hole, feeding off its energy, trapping anyone who dares to venture too close. I don't know how long I sit there, listening to the hum, feeling the pull, but eventually I get up, drawn by a compulsion I can't explain, a need to see for myself, to understand what lies at the heart of this place. I make my way through the corridors, each step echoing in the silence, each shadow stretching longer, darker, as if the ship is absorbing the light, pulling it into itself. I reach the observation deck, the place where we first glimpsed the black hole, and I stop, staring out into the void. The black hole looms before me, vast and unending, its surface rippling like a dark sea, drawing everything into its depths. And in that moment, I understand. I see it for what it truly is, a mirror, a reflection of every possibility, every decision, every version of myself that has ever existed. It's not just a black hole, it's a nexus, a convergence point, where all versions of me come together, caught in an endless loop, bound to this place for eternity. I press my hand against the glass, feeling the cold seep into my skin, and I realize that I'm no longer afraid. I'm beyond fear, beyond hope, beyond anything that resembles the person I once was. I am a part of this place now, a fragment of the infinite, a piece of the puzzle that stretches across time and space, caught in the gravity of a force that defies all understanding. As I stand there, staring into the abyss, I see them, countless versions of myself, drifting in the darkness, their faces blurred, their bodies stretched and distorted, each one a shadow of the person I used to be. They move in unison, a dance of despair, a chorus of lost souls bound to the black hole's orbit, forever reaching, forever falling, forever trapped. And I know that I am one of them now, that I will join their ranks, that I will become another ghost, another echo in the void, a fragment of myself lost to the endless pull of the black hole. But there's a strange comfort in it, a sense of peace that comes from knowing that I am not alone, that I am part of something greater, something vast and unending, a force that stretches across the cosmos, binding us all together in its dark embrace. I close my eyes, letting the darkness wash over me, feeling myself dissolve into the void, my thoughts, my memories, my very essence slipping away, becoming one with the black hole, with the ship, with the infinite. And in that final moment, as I fade into nothingness, I understand the truth of this place, the reason we were drawn here, the purpose of our journey. We are all echoes, fragments of possibility, reflections of ourselves scattered across the universe, bound to each other by threads of fate, by the choices we made, the paths we took, the lives we lived. We are all part of the same story, the same endless loop, caught in the gravity of a force that defies understanding, a force that binds us together, that draws us back again and again to the same place, the same moment, the same endless darkness. And as I slip away, as I become one with the black hole, I know that this is not the end. This is only the beginning, the start of an infinite journey, an endless cycle of life and death, of hope and despair, of light and darkness. I am part of the black hole now, a ghost in the machine, a shadow in the void, an echo of myself reaching out, forever falling, forever lost, forever bound to this place, this ship, this endless, merciless loop. And somewhere in the distance I hear it, the faint rhythmic hum, the sound of another ship, another crew drawn into the black hole's pool, their journey just beginning, their fate already sealed. And I know that they too will become part of this place, part of me, part of the infinite, caught in the same loop, the same story, the same endless, unbreakable chain. I open my eyes just for a moment, and I see them. Reflections of myself drifting in the darkness, each one a version of who I could have been, each one reaching out, forever reaching, forever lost. And then there is only silence.